From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode number 454. I am Andrew Now Forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek. He is D43 Now Forum, and also on Twitter at D4384 and D43G. Derek, good to be talking to you as always. How's it going?
Oh, it's going well, Andrew. I actually wanted to start off this episode talking about the NLSC YouTube channel. We've been uploading a lot of videos lately, and you personally have uploaded 3 over the last week. One, NBA Street Home Court, which was Street Legends versus NBA Stars, and you uploaded the full games. You also did highlights from an 89 Bulls versus 89 Pistons matchup on NBA 2K14, and you uploaded an NBA Live 2002 gameplay video of Michael Jordan versus Steve Francis going one-on-one, a battle of the cover athletes.
Yes.
So out of the 3 videos, which was your favorite to put together?
Honestly, I think the 2K14 video, simply because that was a bit more creative, I feel, to be able to be a bit more creative with the effects, going for that whole, this is a game that that was recorded on VHS back in the day with the CRT effects and even some of the tracking, the VHS tracking effects as well from Avabi, which, as we've talked about before, such a fantastic piece of software, video editing software, so easy to use, so many great assets. This sounds like an ad read. It's not. You and I just love it so much, but I do enjoy the other videos as well, but that one did give me the opportunity to try to be a bit more creative with what I was doing.
And you also got to use your Elgato.
Of course.
To make that video. So your Elgato HD60, which was newly acquired and whatnot. And boy, what a difference it makes to view a video in 60 FPS as opposed to 30 FPS. So obviously the cutscenes are still 30 FPS, but as far as like the on-court action, the on-court gameplay and whatnot, that is at 60 FPS, and it's so smooth. And, just something as simple as getting to your spot to take a shot, or, getting a straight line drive where you throw it down hard and whatnot, it just looks so much better at that 60 FPS. And I'm so glad that you got that Elgato HD60, because it's definitely motivated you to start uploading more content to the NLSC YouTube.
I've caught the bug. I think I've caught the bug as far as making some more video content, and it does come down to having those tools. Mavavi for the editing, of course, but yes, the HD60 for actually capturing. Yeah, I feel myself wanting to hook it up every time I play, whether it's to the 360 or the PS5, or even playing a PS4 game, obviously on PS5. The internal capture for NBA 2K23, being a PS5 game, is at 60 frames per second, 1080p, so I will use the internal capture for that. But as far as a PS4 game, which still internally captures at 30 FPS and also blocks the sound, which is not ideal, no, the Elgato is fantastic. What again, great hardware.
I still prefer the Elgato over my Series X or PS5 capture. And the biggest reason is because there's so many issues that can happen when you're capturing from the console. You've seen the videos that were submitted for the top 10 or people display on Twitter in general and whatnot, where the audio is not synced and whatnot. True. And there's issues as far as if HDR is on or off, etc. With Elgato, you just always have that picture, right? And the audio is always lined up and it always looks great. So for me, I still try to use the HD60 all the time when it comes to recording off my Series X, or if I had my PS5 plugged in, which right now my PS5 is just basically collecting dust. As far as the 2K14 matchup, what's your favorite thing about the 89 Bulls versus the 89 Pistons? Is it, using the Bulls and, trying to overcome the beating that you might take with Michael Jordan and, getting to the rim and scoring on them and, trying to emulate what happened in real life? What's your favorite part about that matchup?
I think it is. I think it's that idea of rewriting history or replicating a matchup when the Bulls were on the rise and maybe getting a win over the Pistons here and there, but couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. Also, it's from an era before I started watching basketball, so it's kind of there's nostalgia there, but there's not nostalgia there, if that makes sense. They're not direct memories of it, but there's this nostalgia for NBA history, if you will, the history that I learned when I started watching basketball and couldn't get enough and was just learning about the history of the NBA and the sport. And the stories of the bad boy Pistons and the Bulls, those early matchups. But also because that MJ can take off from the free throw line, and I was trying to get us a highlight for the top 10 where I took off from the foul line with MJ.
Yeah, I think they actually removed in NBA 2K23 the traditional Jordan pumping it back from the foul line throwdown, because my brother and I are 40 games in now to our Legends season, and we've tried to do it numerous times, and he doesn't take off from the foul line like that anymore. In fact, he doesn't take off really from the foul line at all in NBA 2K23. So that's a shame. I can't seem to trigger it no matter what. Otherwise, 2K23 really does hit on some signatures, and we'll get into that shortly. But yeah, 2K14 is really satisfying to play with the classic teams because, like, the lighting looks so great and so accurate. On that gameplay video that you updated, and just like the way the animations play out, the game is just like super smooth. And obviously that game's presentation is really, really solid. I mean, it doesn't have the era filter. It doesn't have like Mike Fratello on the mic or the proper scoreboard or anything like that. But the gameplay shines and the players look good on the floor.
You talk about the visual effects of 2K14. If I had one misgiving about that video and making it kind of retro and VHS style, it was that I knew that I was going to be taking away some of the color, some of that way the color pops in 2K14. But I think based on the reaction and how satisfied I felt with it when I finished that video, I think I got the effect more or less how I wanted it. Kind of washed out like the 80s, but still kind of popping at the same time. It's you never want to make 2K14 look bad, because that is a game that still holds up so well.
Yeah, and the tube TV effect in Movavi is really good, and I like the fact that you can decide the strength of it and how much of it, is actually used in the video.
Well, I went back and actually reduced it, because originally I had it about 75%, and it didn't look bad, but it was a little bit too dark. And the 80s TV, it didn't look that dark. It was more washed out, if anything, but the effect was a bit too much. So I scaled it back to the default 50, and I think it worked a bit better.
Also, the other video that you uploaded, one of the other ones, was NBA Street Home Court. And I have such a love-hate relationship with that game. I think that it's really disappointing that the whole game is in 30 FPS. I think it should be a lot smoother. But as you and I discussed, with NBA Live 06 and NBA Live 07 on those next-gen consoles, I'm not sure what EA Sports was thinking, but they released them at 30 FPS. And then they finally got their act together with NBA Live 08. Yeah, I think that's disappointing. And then on NBA Street Home Court, you don't have the same option as you have on NBA Street Volume 2, where you can play against all the NBA teams and complete that mode with someone else.
It's just that single-player campaign, yeah.
It's just that single-player campaign. So it takes, the co-op option out of the equation. So my brother and I will just never play it. You know what I mean? Because there's no goals for us to shoot for. There's nothing for us to dive into together. So I think that they could have done a lot more with that game. I also think that the animations are just not as good or as smooth as the original NBA Street or as NBA Street Volume 2. I'm not saying that it's a rushed release, but there's definitely some issues with NBA Street Home Court that are very similar to like NBA Live 07, including the audio. And I think you could see that, like, even in your video. Like, you did a great job playing it. In fact, you ended up getting in the top 10 plays of the week as the number 5 play with a bounce off of an opponent's head as an alley-oop, which I thought was really cool. But you can definitely see some NBA Live 07 issues in NBA Street Home Court.
There's some pretty impressive tech in there. If you continuously press the trick button, the dribble button, more rapidly, they will dribble the ball quicker. That was ported over to Live 08, the quick strike dribbling. The same tech was then reused in Live 08, so that's where it got its start. And that's that's some nice tech there. But no, I'd have to agree that as much as I like that game, Street Volume 2, even the original NBA Street, so much better in many ways. Having that co-op campaign, and even if you are playing solo, as I did with that game all those years ago, it's kind of a dry campaign. It's very, very repetitive by the end. And the idea is this barnstorming campaign where you represent your home court, put your home court on the map and everything. But it's again, just kind of dry.
There shouldn't be anything dry about street hoops.
No.
I just want to point that out. So that's where they fell short. That's one of the biggest ways that they fell short with street home court. And then the other video that you uploaded was the NBA Live 2002 one, a battle of the cover athletes. You have actually the NBA Live 2002 Wizards Jordan cover.
Japanese version, yeah.
Yeah, the Japanese version. And then obviously Francis was the main cover athlete for that game in like the US and whatnot. That game is so frustrating sometimes, but it definitely has its moments where like a really exciting, powerful dunk will happen. But there's a lot of delay when you're pushing buttons in that game where it doesn't happen on screen when you actually hit the button on the controller. A lot of limitations animation wise and whatnot. I definitely think that NBA Live 2000 is a much stronger game than Live 2002.
Well, one of the reasons that I did the full game for that and not just cutting it up into highlights is I wanted to show some of the roughness of that game as well. Like trying to grab a rebound and jumping for the board and missing it because you jumped for it instead of just trying to pick it up off the ground. That was a big problem in 2001 and 2002 especially, that 2000 didn't have. Some of those old games do have that issue where you get more rebounds on the floor, loose ball rebounds, than actually jumping for them. But 2002 is particularly,
might
egregious.
Be the worst.
Yeah, I'd say
it's definitely I think it's the worst rebounding mechanics in NBA Live's history.
I think so.
In NBA Live 2002, because you literally feel like you have to walk to the ball.
Yeah.
No jumping. You jump, you lose the rebound. Period.
It feels satisfying. If you can actually grab a rebound off a leap, it feels like you've accomplished something, which it shouldn't really feel that special to jump and get a rebound. But yeah, I wanted to include some of that. Some trying to break down Francis off the dribble or get a great spin move into a layup or dunk. Some of them come off, but I also wanted to show that there are some rough moments where you can't get it to work properly.
Yeah, and then there's the brick wall defense in that game, and there's a lot of flip shots.
Yeah.
A lot of flip shots at the hoop where you're trying to do something different and everything, but they keep doing that same little animation. And it's limiting. Like, I think NBA Live 2002 is so limited. And then obviously in NBA Live 2003, they tried to throw everything at you as far as like what you can do. Right, with the right stick dribbling, right stick triple threat, and whatnot. And while it wasn't perfectly implemented in NBA Live 2003, and the game leaned a little bit too arcade, it still gave the user a lot more control and a lot more fun on the stick. So I think they did a good job. However, I do want to say this: I uploaded a gameplay video of from NBA Live 2005, where you and I connected on Parsec, and we were playing the PC version. I was the host. And we used the Nuggets versus the Cavs. So this is sophomore seasons for both Carmelo Anthony and LeBron.
Wasn't that a huge matchup back in the day? Wasn't that a huge...
Yeah, back in the day, it was everything, right? I mean, remember all the advertisements for when they were going to play each other?
Absolutely, yeah.
And whatnot. But, man, that was so fun. I have one big gripe with the gameplay, and it actually kills the flow for my brother and I to play co-op. In fact, I don't think we're going to play much co-op on that game because of it. The biggest gripe I have is when you throw a pass in that game, the receiver always, well, not always, probably 99.9% of the time, stops to catch the ball. So this is on the fast break. This is if they're trying to cut to the hoop. This is just passing period in that game. So it destroys momentum and it destroys fast breaks. And you'll think you have like a 3-on-1 or something like that. And your guy will stop to catch the ball. And by the time like you can make the next pass, the defense is back and whatnot. And there your fast break is foiled. So I think you would agree that passing is that portion of the passing game is the biggest gameplay weakness in Live 2005, but otherwise, what a fun time.
Oh yeah, I mean the fast break logic, the passes on the break, those catches and the stopping, that always stands out as the biggest issues with Live 2005. That Live 06 PC and that version, the PS2 and Xbox version as well, did resolve. And a lot of people focus on Free Soul Superstars and the love-hate relationship that people understandably have with that mechanic. But 06 did improve the fast break logic and the cutting to the basket on the fast break, and not having the defense catch up as much, not having those stopping with the passes. That was something that 06 fixed. But apart from that, it does feel great on the sticks. Those alley-oops are so satisfying to throw, especially after playing a game like...
and smooth.
Yeah. NCAA Basketball 10, which is a great game in its own right, but trying to throw lobs in that game, as we said in the previous show, when we got one of those to actually result in a dunk, that felt like a huge achievement. Whereas with Live 2005, we had some great lobs from far out, and that was that was a lot of fun.
How can you not throw lobs to Kenyon Martin when he's around the rim?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like every time Kenyon Martin was around the rim or running on the fast break or something like that, I wanted to throw a lob. Another key about throwing alley-oops in NBA Live 2005 is if you do throw an alley-oop, you avoid the receiver stopping. He'll keep going towards the hoop so he can catch the hoop. So you can actually run a proper fast break when you throw alley-oops. Not only that, just the animations are so smooth in NBA Live 2005. I shared a highlight where I was playing against the computer and I dunked all over Vlade Divac with Marcus Camby. I did like a drop step into a monster two-handed jam. It doesn't get any smoother than that, right? That highlight looked absolutely amazing. There was a play during our game versus the Cavs where I missed a mid-range shot with Earl Boykins, and Kenyon Martin came flying in and did a two-handed tip dunk. I'm sure you remember that highlight. It looked smooth as hell. And just the dribbling is really tight in that game. You don't have to think about freestyle superstars, which makes me like Live 2005 sometimes better than Live 06 because I'm not a big fan of the freestyle superstars. So, like, I'm not thinking about, I'm going to hit this button combination in order to, trigger a specific posterizing dunk or a specific fancy pass, etc. I'm just playing the game of basketball, right?
That's fair.
Yeah. So for me, like our game when we were playing co-op there using the Nuggets, I felt like I was having relaxed competitive fun. And I wasn't like, worried about, did I hit the right combo to trigger a freestyle superstar action?
Well, the great thing about 06 compared to 07 is, well, there's many great things about 06 compared to 07 on both versions of it, but you can actually disable freestyle superstars, and it kind of then plays like an enhanced version of 2005, at least as far as the passing and the fast break logic.
I couldn't figure that out, though. How do you disable freestyle superstars on Live 06? I'll be honest with you. I looked through it. My brother and I were looking to find it, and we couldn't figure out how to do it.
Okay, in the there's a menu for freestyle superstars in roster editing, or the roster screen of roster editing. I forget what it's labeled at this moment, but then you can go through each player that has it and just click on the click on whichever one they've got and make sure they're all disabled. Or I also have a batch file that will do that in the download section. We'll do that automatically for any roster.
Okay. So it's not like an option, as in like in the settings. It's something where you have to go and
roster editing. Yeah.
So it's in roster editing. Okay, so that's a little bit different. So yeah, we may have to try that because we really want to sink our teeth into like a legend season, like a co-op season, on either Live 05 or Live 06. And if we could remove freestyle superstars from Live 06, I think that would be key, and that's probably what we would go with. But Live 2005, what a great release for
it really was.
EA Sports.
Yeah.
And like I have more fun with that game by a decent amount than ESPN NBA Basketball 2K5, to be honest with you. Like I think that the freestyle control in that game is just so smooth. It just gives you more options. You have more control over it than what you have in 2K5. And I think that the presentation is top notch. And I really like Live 2005.
You mentioned that, and you mentioned the animations. We both had a couple of really nice drives with Melo, and mine, I had a crafty crossover at the last minute just to elude a defender as I knifed through the defense in the paint and finished with that dunk, and that felt satisfying. And then we ran the isolation, and I backed it out. I drew out the defender with Camby, and you just went straight through, and it looked amazing. And people say, these games are dated, and as we always say, Derek, in some ways, yes, but a lot of these games hold up a lot better than people think. So whenever someone says, why are you still playing these games? Honestly, give them a go. You'll see how good they still are.
Yeah. It's like there was a play in the Live 2005 game where they tried to throw a pass to the wing, and I stepped in the passing lane and stole it with Melo. And I outran the opposing player to the ball. He ended up diving on the floor and he couldn't get to the ball. And I went coast to coast with the ball and jammed it. It doesn't look much. Doesn't look any better on NBA 2K23 than it did on NBA Live 2005. There, the getting in the passing lane, getting that steal, outrunning the other player. The dunk was smooth. Like, people need to understand that's why we still had so much fun with these basketball games, and that was why we still do.
And it's a satisfaction. It's a satisfaction of trying to do something on the virtual hardwood and pulling it off. And you can have the best animations and the best faces and the most eye-popping graphics, but if trying to play virtual basketball and it doesn't feel like basketball, or it doesn't feel fun or satisfying on the sticks, then it really doesn't matter how good a game looks. And I'll always stress that, because we've seen some games that do look, that they look fine. Like 2K18, visually, that game looks fine. There's some quirky animations with that new motion system, but I mean, you take a screenshot of 2K18, those plays look fine, but playing that game and having the low buys.
Other than the super dark arenas and the oversized heads.
And the Larry Bird, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the Larry Bird.
But I mean, current players that have face scans, they look pretty good. I mean, you can make that game in screenshots look really good, but playing it, and even, I know some people have enjoyed it more with slider tweaks. I just can't really get into 2K18, even with trying that.
I can't either.
So,
yeah.
It's
the worst. I think it's in contention for the worst 2K ever made.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. We talked about 2K17 being possibly still the last great release last week, and then was followed up by possibly the worst, or certainly a big turning point in the series, as we've said before. That they just didn't follow up 2K17 with a. From the moment I played 2K18, I just wasn't feeling it. The vibe is off. The new motion system definitely has some teething problems that they really needed to hold back another year or so. I'm not a big fan of 2K18. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So last week we talked about how NBA 2K17 was probably the last great 2K as far as gameplay goes, depth, and then, being fair to the gamer. This week I wanted to kind of change it up a little bit and state why I think 2K23 might be the best 2K since NBA 2K17. So it kind of gives me high hopes for the series, right? Like maybe we could even get better next year and whatnot. And before I even dive deep into that, I uploaded a video to the NLSC YouTube today, a 2K23 highlight of Clyde Drexler. My brother and I were playing co-op. We were doing our Legends season, where I drove from the perimeter with Clyde Drexler, and I did a one-handed posterizing dunk on Nick Claxton. And right after it happened, while my brother and I were playing, I was like, that looked exactly like the dunk that he did in the 1992 NBA Finals on Bill Cartwright against the Chicago Bulls. And after we got done that game, I looked up that highlight and I put it side by side with my Drexler highlight. And it looks almost identical. It's like 99% the same thing, including the footwork leading up to the dunk, where he goes to plant off 2 feet and then he, rises up and whatnot. And I thought that was so cool and such a good touch by the 2K development team to get that dunk in there, that Drexler dunk. And I know that you were impressed when you saw that. I ended up putting it in the top 10. I think it was the number 3 play this week. But I love those little touches. It's so cool.
And that's the kind of thing we loved about old games as well. When you saw something that really resembled real life, that it would pump you up. And obviously they've come a long way with signature animations in the years since. And yeah, I love that. I love that you did the side by side, and it does, like you say, 99% at least the same. And I thought that was really cool. They have done a great job over the years adding more signature animations when they are properly assigned. Not to bring it down to negativity again, but that is something I do really appreciate about games over the years, because going back and playing Live 2005, as fun as that was, we did see the same dunks a fair amount. And I also like that about 2K14 with Eco Motion as well, that there is that the variation in the animations. It may be only slight, it may just be the way they land after a dunk or the way they kind of adjust in midair if there's contact, but just having that difference, either the animation variety or that system that will alter the animations and branch animations like that, it's just so important. And I think modern games do a pretty good job of that.
No, I definitely agree. My brother and I were actually talking about it, and because we've used Drexler a lot in NBA 2K23 as we did in 2K22, 2K21, and whatnot. And we think that this is the most respect that they've given Drexler in a video game since NBA 2K11 as far as how he's made. His signature shot isn't exactly spot on.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, the jump shot.
Yeah, he doesn't get enough air. They took out the base that he had in 2K11, which was way better. He doesn't, pump the ball back far enough and whatnot. But at the same time, as far as like how effective he is on the floor, what he can do with the dribble, how effective he is when he gets to the hoop, and how he runs the floor and everything, we would say that this is probably the best they've made Drexler since NBA 2K11. So that's a pretty big compliment. And I think that part of the reason they did that, obviously, is because they brought the Jordan challenge back, right?
Exactly.
So, you gotta make Drexler better for that. And obviously 2K11 was the last game that they had the Jordan challenge on, so it makes sense. But I wanted to get your thoughts before I dive into it on 2K23 possibly being the best 2K since 2K17. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, in a way. What I like about 2K23 is that they've done a lot of single player content as far as My NBA Eras. The gameplay against the CPU is a lot better than I feel than 2K21 and 2K22. Playing solo, at least. I know it's a different experience when you're playing co-op against the CPU. Obviously, always is. I do think it's a much better experience, at least in the 5v5. I do think it has the worst My Career mode, from the horrible grading logic to the horrible story to the
story is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I've said Be Fresh in 2K18 is less obnoxious, and that is saying something about the obnoxiousness of the story. Forcing the user into quests before they can just play NBA games. It's much harder to skip the story because it's so integrated into the neighborhood or the city rather than just being something like a prelude of the prelude approach in older games where you could then play through it once and then skip it, or just skip it straight away, was so much better. Now that it's integrated into this attempted open world, you can't skip that stuff, and it's really intrusive. The grading logic, I mean, you can take a wide open shot and you miss it, and it calls it bad shot selection. You get penalized for being dunked on even if you try and, you're actually challenging the shot. Every steal attempt that fails is a bad steal attempt. The grading logic is just ridiculous, which makes it easy to grade out online, makes it harder to get the top grades for VC, and some of the goals in the quests involve getting high teammate grades, and of course, so they've made it intentionally harder by making it stupid. The grading logic is just awful. It is the worst My Career of the entire series so far. I will stand by that. With that being said, if you avoid My Career completely, which I've mostly been doing this year, then it's a lot more fun. My NBA Eras, the amount of work that's gone into that. I know there's some problems with some of the missing players and so forth, but I'm just so impressed by what they've done with that. Even when we were talking about it during the previous season, Derek, you and I were just blown away by what they were trying to do. It's panned out pretty well. The traditional My NBA experience is still there. My team is always going to be that push for recurrent revenue, but it's still fairly well designed with a lot of depth to it. I mean, this is the most fun I've had with a new 2K release, probably since 2K19, 2K20.
Yeah, and I think 2K19 is the game that can contend with it the most, in my opinion. 2K20 had some player movement issues that they've ironed out, like that super hunched over running, and there were some glitchy animations in that game. I think overall that 2K23 animates much better. I think that 2K23 and 2K19 are the ones that are in contention for the best title since 2K17. So I don't play My Career, you know that. Yeah. I don't do the online scene.
Good move.
So those gripes that you have are ones that I'm not going to have just because I'm not playing those modes. However, I like listening to you talk about it because I want to know what they're doing with that mode because it affects the gaming population.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I want 2K to be fair to the gamer. I want people to be, having fun with the games, not getting stressed out by them and whatnot. So always think about your fellow gamer, because while I don't touch those modes, I care about people's experiences with them and I want them to improve. But let's get to the positive here. So for me, here are the things that I really like about NBA 2K23. The ability to outlet passes, do proper outlet passes. Now, this is something that was also in NBA 2K22. This is something that I think Mike Wong wanted to fix in order to bring the fun back into the NBA 2K series. And it definitely helps with it, where it's not like the old motion system where you'll grab a rebound and you'll throw an outlet to the receiver who's only about 20 to 30 feet away from you, and it just goes sailing over his head, right? You can now complete these outlet passes even further than 20 or 30 feet, like going all the way down, mostly down the floor a lot of the time if you're using a player with a good pass rating and whatnot. The fact that you can do that really helps the fast break game. And what's super exciting about basketball, getting out and running, right? Getting out on the fast break, making that great highlight and whatnot. So I love the ability to do proper outlet passing. Also, the ability to make quick passes. I think that in, several of the games since the old motion system, passing often felt delayed, where if you tried to do a give and go, there'd be enough delay where you couldn't properly execute one like you would in real life. Or if you were trying to hit that cutter, you wouldn't be able to hit him right on the spot because there'd be a little bit of a delay when you make passes. I think the passing game has improved immensely.
The floaty passes
in the series
and things like
overall,
that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's not as many floaty passes. If you're trying to post somebody up, there's not as many issues with the defender transferring the ball to get a cheap steal, which we've talked about on prior episodes and whatnot. So I think they've really improved the passing game. Dunks. The dunks are loud. That Drexler dunk I shared is loud. I love how the basket moves on jams. I love the sound effects on the dunks. I love how you can jump stop into dunks, spin move into dunks, and it looks so natural and awesome. I think it adds a whole new element of excitement to get to the rim. NBA 2K17, 2K16 also have that appeal with the old motion system, where it's really fun to get to the rim and throw it down because you can throw it down with power and style. And I think that NBA 2K23 captured that. So I really love getting into the lane and throwing it down, or posting up and getting my defender deep under the basket and, throwing it down as well. And then obviously the improved post game, I don't think it's even close to as good overall as 2K17 and 2K16. But I think that 2K23 has a little bit less suction to it than 2K22 and 2K21, and spin moves don't feel as unnatural as they did in those two titles, and drop stepping works really well, and the hooks are satisfying. Kareem's hook is satisfying. I like overall operating in the post. So before I continue, do you disagree with any of that, or did you notice a lot of those features?
No, I've noticed that, and the dunks are very satisfying. Alley-oops are satisfying when you pull them off. I'm still not a fan of the quick time mechanic. I think it's one of those ones where it's one of those ideas where they've tried to add that mythological skill gap, and it's just busy work. It's just a quick time event. It's not particularly skillful. It's hell online where there's any kind of lag, input delay, and lag online. So I'm just not a fan of that mechanic. But when you pull something off, and when you master the timing, as I know you and your brothers have with some of the lobs that you show off, yeah, it just looks and feels so satisfying. And yeah, it is. I would say on the sticks overall, I still do prefer 2K14. There's a reason I've dusted off 2K14, and the fact I'm so hooked on 2K14 for the last year and a half or plus. But no, I have been playing 2K23 more than 2K21 and 2K22 very easily, and it's a game that I can pick up and play much more often.
Yeah, I will say this about alley-oop. So obviously I don't go on my career, and I'm not, worried about lag or anything like that because I'm not playing those modes. That was actually one of my pros for 2K23 because they made it so the alley-oop meter was a little bit more forgiving and timing is easier than it was last year. Like the mechanic actually makes more sense. Like if you push the shoot button, when you're going up and you're about to catch the ball and you're going to like, when you push it and then you release the button, it feels more like a real event as opposed to like a ridiculous quick time event where you're holding down the button for like an ungodly amount of time.
Sure.
Right. Like,
I still think it's unnecessary. I guess that's my.
I think it's I agree with you. I agree with you that I think it's unnecessary, but my brother actually loves it. And the reason is because now he feels like he's taking part in the play. Where if I throw him an alley-oop on NBA 2K17 and we're on the fast break and I throw it, it's just me throwing it to him running down the floor and he has no control about what happens when he catches the ball. He's not really part of it.
Just the positioning really and running to the spot, And then
right, exactly. So now he's part of that.
That makes sense.
So that's actually one thing that we've enjoyed. And the only reason why we've enjoyed it this year and didn't really enjoy it last year is because the mechanic really wasn't making sense last year. Like, we feel like we timed it right, we timed it appropriately, and we would miss dunks for no reason. But now it makes sense overall. So that's actually an improvement from 2K22. So it's something that we've enjoyed. So improved alley-oop meter. Defense overall is fun. We were talking about that last night after we played a game. I think that the poke steals are excellent. It reminds me of old games like NBA Live 2005 and whatnot. I like the ability to snatch blocks out of the air, even though I think it happens a little bit too often, and that's a little unrealistic. It's fun to get blocks. It's fun to get steals. It's fun to intercept passes in the passing lanes. I think that defense overall can be really fun to play, and you feel like you have to be on your toes because, like you mentioned before, the CPU, the AI is better in 2K23 than it was in 2K22. So they're going to move the ball and they're going to try to find that open man and they're going to run plays. And when you play against Chris Paul, you play against the Suns and whatnot, Chris Paul plays almost identical to his real life counterpart. So like, you're guarding Chris Paul a certain way. So I think that overall improved defensive mechanics have helped. Mode wise, we have, the My NBA eras. Obviously, that's added content that people have been able to sink their teeth into. I think it's kind of a play off of the UBR and allowing people to do like UBR type activity just on the console. Like, it's made it accessible for everybody. Yes, there's obviously some missing real faces, missing players, incorrect jerseys at time, incorrect courts, but the bones are there. And hopefully they improve on that. So I do like that aspect. And then obviously my team, there's no contracts. Right. Not a fan of the free agent cards. Yeah. Not a fan of the free agent cards. I think you would agree with that. And the fact that you can't put them on the auction house.
I've never been a big fan of those. It's always felt a bit wasteful. I mean, and the fact that you can only, if you want to sell them, if you get a double, you can now trade them in on the exchange, so you can put them towards something possibly better. But you can only sell it for 1 MT, which is, again, the exchange is nice, but they feel kind of a bit underwhelming.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But the fact that there's no contracts and whatnot, and the highlights are so good at NBA 2K23, and you can, get a lot of the players that you want, and you can just keep them, right? And you get to, play them night in and night out. I think it's made me spend a lot more time on the mode, and upload to the NLSC YouTube and share those highlights on Twitter, on the NLSC, and whatnot. So those really are a lot of the strengths, in my opinion, of NBA 2K23 that make me think that, along with 2K19, or maybe if I revisit 2K19, I would like 2K23 a little bit better. I'm not sure, but 2K23 could be the best 2K since 2K17. There's things that I still am super frustrated that they haven't ironed out or fixed yet, like things like the sliding skating. I still think the foot planning is very poor in comparison to 2K17, 2K16. I still don't think the dribbling is as tight in 2K23 as it is in NBA 2K17, so the ball handling and whatnot. I still think there's a little bit too much suction in the game. I think that shooting has taken a turn for the worse. I'm not a huge fan of it. Mike Wong came out and stated that during the development cycle, they didn't have time to implement a normal shot timing. And I think that that's a big mistake because shooting is such a big part of basketball. And the fact that they released the game with only late and early, or very late and very early, is kind of ridiculous because we're talking about shooting in basketball. How is there not a normal release point? My brother and I played last night and we were shooting the way we always shoot in that game, and we shoot very well overall. And we were putting up air balls because they sent through a patch I don't know if it was like a secret patch or anything like that, because I didn't see any patch notes about it. But the shooting has been changed in that game. And yeah, now it's like trying to adjust to a completely new shooting mechanic. So we're trying to figure that out. We might try to play tonight and see if we can figure out what the release point is now. But yeah, the shooting, the suction, the skating, and those are probably the biggest weaknesses in NBA 2K23 for me.
No, I think those are good observations. I would definitely agree. The thing about 2K23 that I really like and appreciate is that it seems like there's been that focus on gamer enjoyment and fun. And that's not to say that it's never been there in recent years, but they've definitely been pushy with the recurrent revenue mechanics, which is still an issue in 2K23. You still have the issues with the rewards in the season rewards in my team and my career not feeling as satisfying as they should. To me, you've still got a lot of those. You've got the loot box mechanics. You've got the gambling. Although some content creators actually shill for that. I saw a recent tweet from a rather large influencer that was upset about fairness in that mode, which it just boggles the mind. But we've talked about that before. But I did want to throw that out there. That to your point, Derek, think about your fellow gamers, the ones who are no money spent. But anyway, that is an issue still, and VC earnings in my career are ridiculously low. So there are those issues on top of everything else. But the fact that they've put in my NBA eras, the fact they've put in the Jordan Challenge for 2K23, appropriately celebrating 23, and the fact that there is those changes to gameplay. And I need to spend some more time trying to throw some lobs and getting used to that timing. I'm encouraged by you saying that they have changed the timing. It's just a matter of me getting used to it in that game. They have made some changes focused on having that solid experience and that fun experience on the sticks that it felt like it was being compromised in previous years or not focused on enough, rather than just putting in Crocs, in the city and the neighborhood, fluff and useless bells and whistles, rather than actually focusing on things that people would really enjoy and giving solo gamers or offline gamers and a more stuff to get excited about. That's something I really like about 2K23, and I hope that continues into the future.
Yeah, the Jordan Challenge, the My NBA eras, there's still things in there that they implemented a couple years ago that are super helpful for roster creators, like carrying over players' DNA, importing, exporting. You can still edit all the players in the league and everything. It's just so much more than what NBA Live 19 offered us, right?
Yeah.
In that regard, as far as like offline content, roster editing, and all of that. So yeah, I'm hopeful for NBA 2K24 to take another positive step in the right direction. I've already said this before, I've gotten my money's worth with that game. 40 games into a season with my brother co-op, 12-minute quarters, playing every game. That's a lot of gameplay. It's a lot of time on that game. And I'm obviously going through domination and whatnot on my team. So that's obviously a lot more gameplay. So we've definitely gotten our money's worth. And that's a good feeling. And, you're back online playing NLSC Thrill for the first time since NBA 2K17 with your buddies, with Kenny and whatnot. And I think that means something. Like, that's a positive sign. So the fact that you were able to dive into that and you've been able to have a little bit of fun with it, that's a good sign.
Well, I do have to follow up on that, actually, that our recent sessions have not been particularly enjoyable. The online scene always goes this way, that the content creators, the influencers who focus on the builds and everything have found out how to break the game, so all the meta builds are out there and all the metagaming is just kind of ruined the online scene, as it does after a couple of weeks. But to that point, offline. There is so much in that game that if you're not enjoying that, there's My League Online, My NBA Online, I should say, in the next-gen version. My League Online is on the current-gen version as well. So there's so much you can do multiplayer that doesn't involve the meta builds and everything of my career and all the other nonsense of my career. So, yeah.
For our listeners, can you explain what that means from a gameplay perspective? So, like, what has it been like on the court since, like you said, those meta builds have taken over? Like, how does it impact you gameplay wise?
It means that anybody trying to play actual basketball with real basketball strategy is going to get smoked by people who have just found out how to exploit certain animations, how to how to overpower their builds with the right badges, and have just got up to 99 overall, so they've got the souped up ratings, the right badges to just dominate and force certain situations, force advantages that aren't there at the beginning. Once everybody gets overpowered, if you haven't been on the grind or indeed paying for those upgrades, and you're using real strategy, then you're not going to have a good time. And the rec is just full of people who don't want to play basketball, don't want to compete. If they get down by 6 points in the first minute, they start quitting or flopping and just trying to sabotage the game. So there's a lot of toxicity in the online scene, and it comes down to the fact that if you either grind hard in the NBA side of my career to get to a point where you can play online, or you're doing that online. And there's a lot of selfishness because of that. So the whole design of my career and its connected modes doesn't really encourage team play in the online team play modes, ironically and unfortunately. And it just leads to a lot of selfishness, a lot of toxicity. This scene should be so much better, but again, no matchmaking and this focus on the getting a god tier player, if you will. This OP build is just really, and the fact that they've actually given us, in theory, more creation tools for the builds, but everyone ends up making the same OP builds that whatever content creators has suggested. So it's just not a fun experience online. It doesn't look like basketball too often.
Somebody mentioned that on the Discord, that they were frustrated with the style of play online.
Yeah.
And, how they're not, people don't understand something as simple as playing weak side on defense, or like help defense, or, what they're supposed to do when somebody does come up and like set a pick, like if they're supposed to go over, if they're supposed to go under, not how to, understanding how to run a proper fast break.
Sure.
And people want stuff like that. Like
people want stats,
right,
rather than winning.
People want stats, and there's definitely like a good portion of the player base doesn't truly understand the game of basketball. But like you stated, what can happen is, all these build videos that go up, oh, this is the optimum build, this is the build you should do, and all of that gets a lot of people making the same types of players, and then, finding ways to cheese the game as opposed to play real basketball. And because of the way the game is made, because it favors those builds, those meta builds and whatnot, that you can get smoked by them, even though you know more about basketball and you may be even better at the game than they are. So yeah, I can see that being super frustrating. Like I said, I'm really glad I stay away from that online scene, because it's just not for me.
No, and that is the strength of 2K23, that it has all those modes that if you don't want to deal with that nonsense, you don't have to. And again, compared to Live 19, as you brought up, that was so focused on the streets in particular, the live events, that the franchise mode was watered down. The NBA side of the league in the one was kind of watered down as well, was way behind what the NBA side of my career is like. And that you don't have all those roster editing and roster sharing functionality that you have. I mean, the fact that it took to Live 18 to get actual roster editing in the game, just the focus was not...
Yeah, it's still super... but it's still super limiting. And I almost struggle to even say that's roster editing. Like, it's just super...
And it's buggy
basic.
In Live 19 as well.
Yeah, and it's super... Yeah, and it's also, super buggy.
And that's disappointing. I mean, we could go on and on about the disappointments of NBA Live on the 8th generation, and probably will circle back to that at some point. But to that point, 2K23 has been pretty satisfying for the most part. And I just like that after 2 years of not wanting to touch the latest game... I mean, I'm obviously still playing 2K14 and revisiting Live 2005 with you and other games, and, I've been mentioning my 20-year high school reunion the last few weeks. That was last night, so my voice is a little bit off today. That's probably because I was at good cheer last night. But, revisiting those games from the early 2000s from that nostalgia trip, and other favorites as well, and even getting into some 2K6 recently on Xbox 360 and having a blast with that. But it feels nice that 2K23, if nothing else, at the very least, and not to damn it with faint praise, but at the very least, it's interesting to me. It's appealing to me. I'm keen to put it on. Whether I play it as fanatically as I have some other games in the series, maybe not. But I can get on there and have a good time. I want to put it in and play.
You're intrigued by it.
Yeah,
and that's a good thing.
Enough appeal. Right? There's enough appeal to it to actually want to play it and not say, you know what, I'm just going to put this on the shelf. I'm going to say, okay, I'm not getting my money's worth this year. I'm going back to 2K14. Although I am going back to 2K14, that I am still inclined to play 2K23, and that's a huge improvement. I love what they've done with the offline stuff, the single player stuff this year, and again, I hope they continue to cater to that audience as well as the online audience and improve the situation for my career players and the connected experiences, which is why I'll continue to advocate for it, even if I'm moving away from it, because as you said, stand up for your fellow gamers, support your fellow gamers. We should all have a great experience in NBA 2K and any basketball game that comes out.
100%. But Andrew, from NBA 2K23, the newest 2K, to the original NBA 2K, the original is part of our mailbag question this week.
That's right, yes. So how about we go ahead and open up the mailbag?
To the mailman. Slamming it down with a nasty dunk.
So, Andrew, I asked the community if they could name, without cheating, the top 5 overall players in the original NBA 2K for the Sega Dreamcast. Now, remember, that game came out in 1999, and it was reflecting, like the ratings were reflecting, the 98-99 season, so the shortened 50-game season. And before we get to the community responses, like I've done the last couple of weeks, I wanted to ask you, can you name the top 5 overall players in the original NBA 2K?
So I have to, if I was to cheat on this, I'd have to be creative because I have not played much of that game except when we connected on it and did not own it back in the day, not in my collection now, so I can't just fire it up. So this is just guesses based on that 98-99 season and performance. So I'm going to say top 5, KG, AI, Shaq, Duncan, and I'm going to go out of the box here and say Grant Hill, my 5.
Okay. You got a couple of them. So you got Iverson. And you got KG, and you said Duncan, right?
I did, yes.
So you got those 3. That's correct. So Iverson's 97, Tim Duncan's 96, and KG is 95. Those are the top 3 overall players in the original NBA 2K. These next 2 are surprising and kind of make me mad in a way. Like, it's a little disappointing because it doesn't really make much sense. Number 4 best overall player in the game is Scottie Pippen at 94 overall. And I want to tell you how much this frustrates me because I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know if there's some logic behind it because I guess he's an all-around player and whatnot. But in the 98-99 season, he averaged 14.5 points per game, shot 43% from the floor, 72% from the line, 6.5 rebounds, 5.9 assists. He played about 40 minutes a game. 2.0 steals and 0.7 blocks on a underperforming Houston Rockets team. And he was obviously out of his prime at that point. In the next season with the Trailblazers, I think he averaged about 12 points per game, 12.5, something like that. But Pippen being 94 overall, which is higher than Shaq, who was 93 overall, higher than Karl Malone, higher than Chris Webber, at that point higher than Grant Hill. Gary Payton was really doing it at that point, putting up the numbers, and he was really great in the league. He's higher overall than Gary Payton. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that Pippen got a 94 overall in the original 2K.
Those are some outdated ratings from the sounds of it. 94 overall. That actually makes him higher than MJ, legend MJ in NBA Live 2000, who was 93. This is before they had 99 overalls in the default rosters. So there's a point of comparison for you. But yeah, I don't think he should have been one of the top 5 players. I mean, you could argue that there's no time that Pip should have been a top 5 rated player even in his prime in games, but certainly not in coming off the 99 season. That's ridiculous.
But Rockets, Blazers, Pippen, that's insane.
Even 98 Pippen, even Bulls, even the final year of Bulls Pippen was 2004. Definitely wasn't 94 overall by that point. But final Bulls first run with the Bulls Pippen, it already, I'd say, slipped below that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So tied with him overall in the 5th place spot, actually, is Jason Kidd at 94 overall. And I think that's ridiculous that he would be higher overall than Shaq. I think with what they're doing with Jason Kidd and Pippen is they're looking at, these are 2 players with high rebounds and assists for their positions.
Yep.
And high steals. And I wonder if those are the things that factored in. But there's no way I would ever put Kidd and Pippen at that point, for example, over Shaq or a couple other players. for that matter. Jason Kidd only at that point was starting to become a thing, right? We're talking about based on the 98-99 season. We're talking about Eminem Jason Kidd with the blonde hair.
Bleach blonde, yeah.
Right, and whatnot. So, some other ones before we get into the community's guesses. So, again, the top 5 is Iverson at 97, Duncan at 96, KG at 95, which is pretty high for that KG, although he did have a really good campaign. Scottie Pippen at 94, Jason Kidd at 94. Then it goes Shaq 93, Chris Webber 93, David Robinson 93. That's pretty high for David Robinson. They did just come off winning a championship, but he was also coming off of his injury and he was starting to go down.
On the downswing of his career. I mean, still all-star level, but not sort of top. Not in contender, no longer contender. I mean, obviously through the 90s there was times when you could at least argue that he's top, maybe the best center in the league. With Hakeem going back and forth, and Hakeem, I think, pulled ahead, obviously. But you could at least make that argument of his skill level and performance that he's at least up there, top 2, top 3. By that point, maybe starting to slip a bit.
Right. And then Gary Payton, 92. And then a few players at 91, Alonzo Mourning, Reggie Miller, and Hakeem. Reggie Miller being at 91, I talked about rebounds, assists, and steals. Those are not this Reggie Miller's forte. That's not something he excelled in. So I'm not sure what goes into a 91 overall rating with Reggie Miller, because it's certainly not his rebounds, assists, or steals or blocks. But yeah, he got a 91. Hakeem being a 91 is maybe a little bit high for him at that point, because he was also starting to go on the downswing of his career, and he was also part of that failed experiment with the 98-99 Rockets, where it was Hakeem, Barkley, and Pippen. A surprising one, Sharif Abdur-Rahim got some serious respect. He got a 90 overall. I thought he was one heck of a player, but didn't expect to see him at 90 overall.
Like top tier, kind of,
Yeah, same overall as Karl Malone. So Karl Malone was a 90 overall as well. And Stephon Marbury was 90 overall. Some notables. Kobe was 89 in that game. Dirk, young, new Dirk, 69 overall. Steve Nash was 70 overall. And Vince Carter, fresh off of his rookie season, is 82 overall.
It's obviously it may not be as egregious as a couple of those other examples that you mentioned, but Allen Iverson at 97, the top player in the game, he is the cover player, so that's kind of a political, if you will, decision. But I don't think there's any time when, I mean, he was the MVP a couple of years later, of course, but I don't think there's any time in the league, during his career that you would say AI is the best player in the league. And that to be 97 in the top, you've got to be the best player. I mean, yes, Duncan's right there at 96, but yeah, a little bit of a homer pick there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as the cover athlete, I think that's why they did that, because he hadn't had his MVP season yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So right, but yeah, let's get to the community responses, because I'm not sure anybody got this right. I think it's a really tough one.
Well, those unorthodox choices, and Pippen, I think, is the one, the stumbling block. Although there is a couple of people who did pick that, including the Live 01 legend Nate Stasho, Iverson, Malone, O'Neal, Mourning, and Pippen.
Surprised he said Mourning, but Mourning was a player that could achieve that high overall because of his overall basketball ability, his dominance, like on the defensive end. I understand why he guessed Mourning, and Mourning did receive like a good rating in that game. Props to him for guessing Pippen. I think he was the only one that guessed Pippen, or maybe one other person did, but yeah, I mean, I guess he probably knows that Pippen was probably overrated in some past games.
Mourning was actually on my short list when I was trying to compile my guesses. So, yeah, I can definitely see why. And just kept coming back to him. I thought, no, maybe Grant Hill. But no.
Hey, Mourning was close, though. He was 91 overall. So they definitely gave him respect in that game.
And we go to the other Live 01 legend, Roger Ward, Shaq, Malone, Duncan, Iverson, and GP.
Yeah, good guess with Gary Payton, who I just had mentioned. He was on the up and up in his career statistically, leading that Sonics team. It was his team at that point because Kemp was gone now. Kemp was with the Cavs. So, yeah, and he got over a 90 overall rating. So it was a good guess. He mentioned Shaq. How could Shaq not be in the top 5 at that point? He was being talked about as the best center in the NBA. Yeah, that was surprising. especially with having Pippen and Kidd over him overall. And then Karl Malone hadn't gone down at all, right?
MVP.
Karl Malone was
MVP.
still putting up, yeah, exactly. And he was still putting up those numbers and whatnot. So I'm not sure why Karl Malone, for example, is under Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
As an overall rating.
Knowledge Bone says, all I know is Iverson was a 97, which was correct. My guess would be, in no order, Shaq, KG, Duncan, and Kobe. And like the last couple of weeks, I think Kobe's one of those red herrings, because he just wasn't there yet.
He wasn't there quite yet. He was starting to put up the numbers. He made the All-Star team even not like the 97-98 season. But his numbers weren't really there yet. He wasn't one of the faces of the league quite yet. It was based off that shortened 50-game season in 98-99. But I see why you would bring him up. KG was starting to put up the numbers at that point. KG was, definitely like a face of the league at that point. And he also came in a year earlier than Kobe. KG had a really higher rating, higher than I expected it to be in the original NBA 2K.
Next up, we have Teddy Bear the Gamer, guesses Iverson, Garnett, Kidd, Shaq, and Duncan.
You got 4 of them. Teddy Bear the Gamer, I completely agree that Shaq should be in the top 5. You got 4 out of them. You even got Kidd. Shaq should be in there instead of Pippen. But
Agreed.
He's not.
Absolutely. Kid Cash guesses Shaq, KG, Iverson, Duncan, and Kidd.
Again, that's Shaq. Everybody thinks Shaq should be in there, as do I. So, same thing with Teddy Bear the Gamer. I'm sorry, Kid Cash. He should be in there.
And finally, we have Juicy Shaq Meat guesses 97 Iverson, 96 Shaq, 95 Duncan, 94 Garnett, and 94 Malone. So got Iverson, got Duncan obviously, and KG as players who are in the top 5, though not in the order, apart from Iverson, of course, at 97.
Yeah, great guesses. I mean, Karl Malone is an obvious appropriate guess for this. Shaq, obviously. So, yeah, great job by the community. I think that the only one that mentioned Pippen was Nate Stasho.
That's right,
he should get an award for even guessing that. That's really impressive. I should send him another game as a reward. But because they've been building their collection, him and Roger. But yeah, no, thank you to the community for participating once again. I'm going to try something a little bit different for next week's mailbag, and I hope you like that, but it will involve your participation, in guesses and whatnot. But yeah, that was great.
Yes, thank you as always to everyone who participated. We love doing the mailbag segment. We love the interaction, so we are going to keep that going, of course. That has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in. We invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nv-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, we'd love to connect with you on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on Twitter at D43G or at D4384. I'm on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43. And please keep an eye on the NLSC YouTube channel, as a lot of gameplay videos have been going up from, all eras of basketball gaming. The top 10 is on there. The podcasts are being uploaded on there. So we'd love to get your, interaction on that content and your support.
Stay tuned for those Live 07 and Kids Sports Basketball highlights, or lowlights, as the case may be. I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. Our Instagram is NLSC Basketball. Our aforementioned YouTube channel is youtube.com/NBLive Series Center. And of course, give a look to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.